All right, guys, welcome back to the course. In our last lecture, we started setting up the Facebook ad campaign and we chose our objectives. Now, let's continue now with the ad set. Now, depending on the objective, you'll see a different group of things to set up each time, but in general, it's about setting up who you want to actually see your ad, what you want people to do, and how much you want to spend in total in the process. I'm going to walk you through our example here where we set driving traffic as our objective, but I'll mention a few other options along the way. So since we chose to drive traffic, the first setting we see is on the ad set is going to be, guess what, traffic. This is where you tell Facebook if you want to drive traffic to your website or to your app. Now in our case, well, it's going to be a website, so we'll keep the setting as is and we'll enter the URL later on in our setup. They will bring it to our attention. The next setting is offer. And at this point, I don't want to do anything with this. I just want to create an ad, but no coupons or discount codes right this second. Let's form the basics first, and then later on, you guys can get into the more advanced stuff. We can skip this, and I'm just going to leave it off. Now, if you chose something else, you'd probably see a different setting to begin with. Like if you chose conversions as your objective, a conversion setting will show up where you tell Facebook what path you want customers to take. Or if you choose, say, like product catalog sales as an objective, products will show up. And that's a whole other thing where, well, you're just going to set up product listings on your Facebook page. Like I said, the settings will vary and apply to the objective you chose. So follow along with what Facebook shows you. It's pretty straightforward. Since we're doing a split test, we're going to see the variable section. With a split test, you can run multiple ads and see which performs best, but to be honest, the simpler the better here. If you're starting out, I suggest you do a simple A/B test, 2 versions, but change only one thing about them. Now, I know this is a little bit different than what I was saying with Google AdWords, but this is because with Facebook, you can change your audience in such a greater degree that at first, I think it's worth tailoring the audience and then figuring out the ad. So in this case, I'm going to test my audience to see if one group would perform better than another. That's usually a bigger variation. Maybe Generation X fans would like the service more than millennials. I don't know. Let's test that and let's just see. Now, first we need to define our audience. Audience settings are generally going to include the following. We have location, which could be people living in a location, visiting there even, or were recently there. Then we have age range and gender. We have their language. So then detailed targeting lets you filter your audience. You can either include specific people or exclude them based on really detailed attributes. For example, if you wanted to target millennials, you could click in the include field, choose demographics, then generation, then guess what? Millennials. Yes, they actually have that written out for you. You'll see that immediately adds over 1 million people to your potential audience. And as you pick different attributes, the audience size and numbers over on the right will change. Now, in most cases, you're hoping to define an audience right kind of in the middle of that green range of the audience size meter. If it's too broad, then you're not going to be effective with your ad placements. And in fact, Facebook's not even really going to know where to put them, and you're going to end up getting charged a lot more than you should. But on the flip side, if you go too specific, then you're just not going to get enough volume. So you're just not going to have enough people looking at it. So you're just not really going to move the needle in terms of your ad campaign. If you're trying to get 1,000 customers, you can't do that with a really, really narrow ad campaign unless you're fine with running it for 6 months. Let's do a little bit more here. Now I'm going to change my location from the US to San Francisco. So I'll click in the location field, start typing San Francisco, and it'll show me that as a choice. When I pick it, well, the audience size updates. You can see that on the side. Now it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Great spot to be, but my work is not done. If I decide to include any other attributes, well, the audience size probably should increase. For example, let's say I sell products that support the local football team like the 49ers, and I want to drive traffic to the site with my ad. So another way to define my audience is to include people who are fans of the team. So I can actually type in 49ers, and there I can pick the team from the list that shows up, San Francisco 49ers. And we see the audience in the upper right has increased just a little bit more. So go ahead and choose whatever attributes you want to finalize in your audience. Just remember to shoot for an audience size somewhere in the middle. And if the arrow is pointing straight up in the green, that's great. Not too narrow and not too broad. It's kind of the Goldilocks. When you're good, just click save this audience and then give it a name that'll help you recognize it later. I personally like to name them like my first version, second version, third version, or I'd say like 49ers fans plus something, or 49ers fans minus something. And as I start figuring out more and more, I'll start tailoring it. But I like to save the audiences because sometimes I want to go back and retrace my steps. So I'm going to call this one like San Francisco 49ers millennial fans and hit save. So now under audience settings, you'll see that audience appears with at a glance details about them. Since we're doing a split test, we need to choose a second audience. So here in the variable settings, you can see my millennials audience set is 1. For audience number 2, we can edit the one we just created and then tweak it to create the new audience we want. Easy enough. I'll just choose that millennial audience again, but then I'm gonna click the edit button below and then I'll go in here. I'm gonna find where it says generation, click that, and then again, I'm gonna pick generation X this time. And obviously I'm gonna deselect millennials. Now we save this as a new audience using the button at the bottom, and we'll call this the San Francisco 49ers Gen X fans. Perfect. All set with the variable and the audience information. Moving on. Now the next setting is placements, and I suggest you leave it as is with the recommended automatic placements. Placement settings include the device type people are using and the network they'll see the ad on, including Facebook, Instagram, Facebook's audience network, which actually can include a lot of other websites. At first, I like to use all of them and then look at the stats and then figure out which ones are working. In general, placements on the side of Facebook, we talked about this before, are terrible in the right column. And in general, mobile ads are just harder when you're asking for more from people on the landing page. So keep that in mind. But up until this point, unless you have a specific reason to show ads only on mobile, maybe your thing is literally mobile only or only on Facebook, your thing doesn't work for mobile or something like that, then I personally just leave this as it is right now. Now the last setting worth looking at here is the budget and schedule, or if you're doing a split test, the split test budget and schedule. The easiest way to go about this is to decide how much money you want to spend in total and how many days you want to run it for. If you did 10 days with a limit of like $10 a day, well, you spend no more than $100. Keep in mind with a split test, you will be running 2 or more ads at the same time, so you'll be dividing your money amongst the ads. The good news with split tests is that your ads will still be seen, but you'll be hoping for good performance and for a way to essentially define the winner. Keep in mind with split test, you want to obviously get to a certain amount of volume to say that one's a winner. If you spent $10 and said, oh, this one's doing better, that's not enough information. In order to be statistically relevant, you need to get to a certain point. I usually try to do over 100 clicks, and that's when I start feeling a little more comfortable about it. That's at that point when you move from like 100 to 200, then I start really saying like, okay, this one's clearly winning. And there's also one other variable that you can set here. Facebook can actually determine a winner based on performance, and that saves you actually kind of a lot of time. Now, under the schedule, you can check off in the test as soon as the winning ad set can be determined. If you know one ad performs better, well, you don't want to run the worst ad anymore, right? Facebook will just tell you when one is clearly better, and then you can start a new campaign with the winner or split test another one. For our ad, I think I'll run this for 10 days with a total budget of, I don't know, $100. With an even split, the ads will be run 50% of the time, each to determine the winner. This is obviously just an example. I generally suggest spending a little bit more, unless you're just working with really, really, really cheap ads. And if you're okay with bidding really low, just never having your stuff displayed. Now, once I hit continue, we finally move on to the ad creation page. Let's break here and we'll tackle that actually in the next lecture. All right, guys, see you then.